Perfect. My name is Sebastian. Welcome to this presentation about Kaizen-Driven development. There are some keywords, so if none of those resonate with you, probably you are in the wrong room. Be warned, feel warned. One more disclaimer. This is not a presentation about building good software. So not about code at all. So nothing about solid, nothing about patterns, nothing like that. It's a presentation about building good software products. This will be a story of a journey, almost 1.5 years, of an engineering team which was aiming to build the best product in the category. And this is the engineering story of decisions made by engineers, of a squad, very autonomous squad of engineers which were building the engineering-focused organization. Cool. What about myself? Just a few words. And I've started building software in 2001. I think I've went through all the possible positions and roles. And right now my tagline is that I do build and develop teams to create great products. If this presentation will be interesting for you, just check my blog. I'm a very active blogger. I have more than 600 blog posts. So I pretty much document everything, and everything that is in this presentation has been reflected somehow on the blog. Great. Why don't we start with the question? What's the hardest challenge in building software? Some would say naming. Some would say that off-by-one errors. So actually, my thesis is that the hardest thing is scaling. Why? Why so? Because in software, in contrary to other industries, economies of scale do not work. So usually when we do something more, it's cheaper, easier, simpler. It doesn't work in software. So in software, we are facing problems with scaling the complexity. So once the solution gets more and more complex, people. So when we are getting more and more people, or when we are actually scaling people, so we are actually trying to make people better or to help people get better. Scaling the organization, so you know the processes, how the information flows, dependencies, and so on, so on. Preserving culture while scaling the organization, which is another challenge. Because if we succeed to some point, if we do good stuff, it's pretty frequently because of the culture. And scaling culture to the bigger bunch of people when we hire like crazy is a big challenge itself. Scaling technology, I don't think I have to convince you, to be honest. So scaling things like traffic, scaling things like up to the web scale, up to the global scale is challenging as well. Scaling business, obviously. And so at some point we have some sort of greenfield. And let's assume that this greenfield succeeds. So let's assume that our product catches on, that it gets interest, gets traction. So the problem is that once we are scaling, the challenges of today are very different of challenges of yesterday. And especially for many people, we get new people on board and they haven't worked with such a big application or such a big problem yet, because it's growing all the time, it's growing every day. When you have 10%, 20% of monthly growth in any of these categories, they are facing all the time new situations. So pretty quickly, the situation gets out of control, and we are just firefighting all the time. So what usually organizations do, they either try to copy the unicorns, Silicon Valley unicorns, or they try to copy the same patterns, or they try to go for the buzzword lottery. So big companies, successful companies use Kubernetes, so why don't we, for instance? This will save our asses, possibly. When the organization identifies some kind of problem, it just creates the position to solve this problem. And this is how you end with like 30 managers, each manager related to a particular problem. This doesn't really work, unless you want to be an enterprise and this is your purpose itself. The other solution, which is quite frequent, is change figures. So just change people, like invite the consultants and change the managers. And the thing that happens quite frequently, but it's not named explicitly, is that the organization starts with the engineering management, so the managers who know engineering, but then they are replaced by the big boys, by the big guys. So guys with the high management experience, but they don't work in IT, they haven't worked in IT, they're just managers, professional managers. This usually doesn't end well either. So organizations keep the fingers crossed. Organizations hope that things will work, but they usually don't. So in our case, everyone meet company X. Unfortunately, I cannot give you the exact name because of several reasons I don't want to dive into. But meet the organization X, and let me present some context. So X in numbers. At the point of the end of this story, this organization was worth more than $100 million. It was growing like crazy, at least 20% every quarter in terms of the actual business volume. It was already global, dealing with its business in more than 100 countries with the headcount of 100 people. And it was a scale-up. It was not a startup anymore. This organization was not fighting for survival. It was fighting for the multiplier of success. This is very important. It was a challenger in the new industry. And all of it has achieved, it was due to the organic growth for a little bit more than 4 years. So there was no acquisitions, getting other brands and so on. And what are the interesting facts about this organization? So the first law was that there are no coders in the organization, only so-called product developers. I will tell you later what it means. It was a strict engineering organization. 75% of the whole company was the pure software developers. There were no project managers. There was no Scrum. I treat it as the major success factor. There was no HR, no recruiters, no marketing, and what's important, there was no wall between business and IT. There was just business. Everyone was business, including the developers. And it was growing like crazy, not only in terms of business, but also in terms of hiring. So 135% headcount growth in a little bit less than 15 months. So am I actually trying to boast about something here? Not really. Because this particular state, it was not a success itself. It was just the beginning of the journey. The biggest challenges were still ahead, right? Because it's like climbing. It's like climbing K2. That, okay, you've achieved a lot, but right now your next challenge is a little bit different than the one behind yourself, and still you can fall off, and you can die. One error can be very, very, very expensive. Of course, during the whole life of this organization, smart people within were thinking, what should we do next? How we should scale? How to actually grow this business into number one? How to be another Airbnb? How to be another Uber? And of course, we're looking for inspiration. I've encountered this graph in a very interesting, quite recent book by Will Larson. This presents, in a somehow simplified way, the headcount of the successful Silicon Valley organizations. And what really struck me is that, oh my God, currently Twitter is supposed to have around 4,000 people. 4,000 is a lot. What is Twitter? Is this. Basically, this is created by and maintained by 4,000 people. And I know that I'm really, really unfair here because there's a lot of work behind this, right? So there's a lot of analytics, data science, there are APIs, there are different clients for there's this whole art engine and so on. But still, this is maintained by 4,000 people somehow. It sounds like plenty of people just to build this. And it all makes sense. There's a recent book by Reid Hoffman. By the way, there will be plenty of book covers during the whole presentation. I will be not even mentioning them. They are just inspirations that you can use if you want to dig further. So there's the book by Reid Hoffman. He's one of the creators of the original LinkedIn. The book is titled Blitzscaling, and it's about strategy to actually put all the effort into scaling as fast as possible to gain as much of the market without looking at the consequences. You don't care about what happens, you just scale like crazy. So this is what many companies do. And this is basically this trade, that you are not doing careful trading, cash investment, and so on. You just go for inefficient investment, for rapid growth, and you let the small fires burn. You sacrifice the quality, you sacrifice the sanity, you just grow. And we decided, we don't really like it. We would like to build the organization to grow it further in a more sane, thoughtful way. Because we consider that we've started, right now we are living in some sort of post-Scrum era. So the hype over copying the patterns, copying the templates, and copying the Scrum guide is over. Right now, let's go for real agility and for real evolutional design of the organization, not just software, but organization. So we wanted something else. And then we looked for inspiration. And then we looked for Kaizen. So there are three inspirations I would like to speak about. before I actually get into some examples of what we actually did, because this is the most interesting, right? So these 3 inspirations are listed here. The first one is Kaizen, the second one is TOC, the theory of constraints, and the third one is systems theory. And I will just go very, very quickly and cover only the most important points. So what is the Kaizen? It's one of the pillars of so-called Toyota production system, which is basically about the continuous improvement. It was invented by the guy named Taiichi Ohno after the Second World War, when he pretty much elevated the Toyota company, Toyota, you know, the automotive company, to the, I would say, one of the most successful automotive companies in the world. And you have to remember the state of Japanese industry after the Second World War, right? So his approach, this particular pillar, Kaizen, was about applying the continuous improvement on the everyday. And I know it sounds really, really obvious, but you have to, let's say, dig a little bit deeper to find what's so smart about this. So this improvement has to be continuous. It has to be on a daily basis. It has to be habitualized. It has to be a part of the culture. There cannot be just few people who improve stuff. Everyone has to improve stuff. And this improvement has to be an actual improvement, so it has to be fact-based. So coming up with a brilliant idea, why don't we use Kubernetes? It's not an actual improvement. It sounds sexy because it sounds like a new technology, but there has to be some kind of problem you have to be addressing this way. And actually, there are plenty of problems, so you have to be really smart when you pick the problem to be solved. The improvement can only be bottom-up. So people who actually don't put the actual hands-on work usually are not able to propose any reasonable improvements. And the other important thing is that all that continuous improvement is majorly about eliminating a thing named muda. Muda is, in Japanese, is a word for waste. But this is much, much broader than what you typically treat as a waste. Because usually when you hear waste, you think about, okay, maybe code that was necessary because the feature was deprecated. So here the definition is much broader. I will cover it in a minute. So why this actual improvement, and does it really matter? I believe you all know the basic improvement math. So basically, if you start with the efficiency of 1, you can, let's assume that you can either grow or get more efficient by 1% or get less efficient by 1%. So here is then obvious multiplication. And on the right, in the red color, you have your efficiency tomorrow. So it either raises by 1% or is decreased by 1%. And if this stuck, because this stacks, right? So if you multiply this again, because you are getting better or getting worse next day, on the second day in the future, you either get better by 200% or worse. But if you stack this effect for the full year, so if every day you get 1% better or every day you get 1% worse, you can get actually the unbelievable result of getting 37 times better or getting pretty much 50 times slower. Of course, this is just the theory, right? This is just mathematics. This is not achievable and not possible in real life. However, there is one observation that is very critical here, that unfortunately, we get slower and least efficient. It's pretty much the side effect of our work in software development. I will say why in a second. So this is why it can be pretty much unconscious. It just happens. So you actually have to improve all the time, not just to get 37 times faster or more efficient or more productive or whatever, but just to stay on the current level. This is a very important observation, because you have to have some sort of pushback effect all the time, which is, of course, the technical debt, or a model debt, which means the wrong design decisions you've made on the way, or the cost of poor quality, complexity, and plenty of other things. These are not even all listed here. So this means that you have to apply some sort of continuous, let's say, improvement approach to even stay at the current level, because otherwise you're getting less efficient. Other interesting observation by Taiichi Ohno, the creator of Toyota production system, which is related to Kaizen, is that he was able to find out all these improvements on his own as well, just because of these 3 Japanese words, Genba, Genbutsu, and Genjitsu. These words mean that he was able to find any improvements only when he was present in the place where the work was being done. So for instance, how the hell is architect able to propose any improvements if he's not working with the programmers on their daily work? if he doesn't see their daily problems, if he just operates on the higher level, conceptual level, and is not attached to the work in any way. So this was also striking us a little bit. So if we really want to, let's say, keep the machine flowing, keep the machine moving, and if we really want to achieve what we want, then we really have to be really flat and very close to the actual work. So I promised you I will tell a little bit more about Muda, what's the actual waste. So these are several categories of the waste which were proposed in this Toyota production system. This may look quite abstract because they are taken from the production. So transport, motion, it doesn't seem like something that is relevant for building software, right? But these are actually quite easy to map into categories of waste that are typical for building software. Like a non-release code is a waste until it's released. So even if you are doing releases every 3 months, it means that until you release, this code is an inventory and it's a waste. All the gold plating, the fast dependencies and so on are also some sort of waste. And there are many more categories, and I will get back to them when I will go through the examples. Okay, so I mentioned the other inspiration was the theory of constraints. This is absolutely fabulous. It was created by Eliyahu Goldratt, who's an Israeli, who was, because he unfortunately has passed out several years ago, but he was an Israeli economist, and he created the theory of constraints and created a fabulous book titled The Goal. This book was an inspiration for the famous Phoenix project, the book by Ginny Kim, which is some sort of evangelion for the DevOps, the whole DevOps movement. So the theory of constraints is actually quite simple, and I can summarize it for you just in 4 points. So first you have to understand the flow of work. So what's actually happening, in what sequence, where's the value, and so on. Then you have to identify things he names constraint. And this is the only single constraint in the critical path of the system, which limits its capability. And then you have to break or optimize just this constraint. And repeat. And this sounds super obvious. This sounds like kindergarten. But unfortunately, people don't do this. Because the problem was that you have to read between the lines. Where we are optimizing is everywhere. We're optimizing also out of the constraint, which is pretty much wasting the time. Because the software developers are able to find 1,000 improvements. I would say virtual improvements. 1,000 of things to try. The problem is that it's just losing focus. This is not an improvement. The improvement has to be aimed very, very specifically to be an actual improvement. So how to do this and what can help with that? So here comes the systems theory. And again, this deserves even not a separate talk, but 3 separate talks. So the first clarification, system is actually not a software system. It's just some sort of real-life system, which is a collection of interrelated parts, which, what is the most important, is greater than sum of those parts. So for instance, one of the systems I will be covering here right now during this presentation is our recruitment. We've actually treated recruitment as a system because you have candidate inflow, you have filtering because you are testing them, then you have phone calls, you are screening them, you are having them here you are inviting them for the interview and so on. This is some sort of system. And then you have to understand the system. You have to understand its constraints. You have to understand what is blocking your goal in this recruitment system to break this constraint and improve the system. This may sound odd, but it really works in practice. So what's really useful in the systems theory is that it actually comes with some sort of notation for the dynamics of the system. I will not be covering this because this actually is a better material for the workshop than for the presentation. But if you're really interested, just grab me during one of the breaks so I can pretty much create one of such diagrams with you on a scrap of paper. So this example system is the system of myself reading books. So basically there are some stacks, some collections that can increase or decrease. There are some flows between these stacks. There are some feedbacks. There are some variables. And this is basically the word of reverse engineering the reality. You are just visualizing the reality to identify the constraints, to identify the variables, so that you are able to optimize something. And this was another inspiration, how we actually wanted to solve our problems. This was our basic weaponry we equipped ourselves. So these are our 5 major lessons out of Kaizen, theory of constraints, and systems theory. That if you don't fix issues on the spot, they will accumulate and they will slow you down. So either you do it or you just accept the fact that you are slower. Other thing is that you have to be very conscious and you're very aware and eliminate muda, because we don't see the waste on the daily basis. We get used to the fact that stuff compiles slower. We treat it as normal because it increases very, very slowly. And this is the major factor of muda. Sometimes just optimizing such a simple thing as compilation can make such a huge difference as hiring 2 teams of developers. Incredible, but it's true. Genbutsu, the whole point is that you cannot really optimize something if you don't do it. So to optimize recruitment, I have to take over the recruitment. Because the other way, I was not able to identify these constraints. I was not able to actually propose the meaningful improvement. Fix the constraint only. This is super important. I know it sounds obvious, but it's actually very, very tricky. You have to identify the only thing which really matters, because otherwise you are improving things that will not have an effect on your overall system. And finally, visualize the problem, because otherwise, this really helps, because otherwise you are navigating in a complex reality and you don't see how they impact each other. Okay, cool. So maybe let's see it in action. So I will just present you some stories. I will present you some examples of how we applied that in practice in the organization which actually considered itself quite successful. So the first chapter is about recruitment being an engineer's job. The problem is how to reach and recruit best people, because you want best people to actually achieve your goals, to achieve your purpose of conquering this market. So the standard solutions are quite obvious. I'm a software developer. It's a HI problem, so why should I care? This is the first answer. The other answer is just bring more perks, maybe PlayStation or multi-sport subscription or whatever. They will come, hopefully. More crowdsourcing, so more LinkedIn spam, because we all love LinkedIn spam, right? Yeah, another way. And there are plenty of ways, like outsourcing and things like that. So what we did, and this is quite a simplified diagram, I will not cover it in detail, so don't worry, please. We just created the systems theory diagram for recruitment. Like, seriously, we did it. It's much more complex than that. This is a simplified version. Why? Because we wanted to identify what we want to change, and then we wanted to observe the effect and to measure it, actually. We didn't want to revolutionize it, like to build it from scratch or copy the famous book of Brock, How Google Recruits People or whatever. No. We actually wanted to optimize. So the actual result of this optimization, actual result of this, let's say, decomposing the problem, was that we found out our specific problem. Because what? Because context is the king, right? No one knew about our product in our country, because in our, let's say, consumer product is unknown in Poland, and our engineering team was in Poland. So this was a problem, right? People were not attracted by our brand. We're using Elixir to create software, and Elixir is super specific, and there are very few people in the market who actually know what is Elixir. Actually, there are more banking experts which use Elixir, which use different Elixir for the transfers of money, so this is very confusing. Our strong points are really hard to grasp. Why? Because right now, developers, when they look for a job, they use sites like NoFluff Jobs or Just Join IT, and basically these sites try to quantify job offers using very simple variables, like how money you will earn, how big is the team, do you use continuous integration, and so on. But we feel that what's special about our company cannot be described with these values. This was also the issue. So we decided we actually have to differentiate. We actually show what is really special. We have to find our what we call Hedgehog Concept. This is the concept stolen for the book Good to Great. So something we are the best in. And we've done a lot of internal research. We've actually asked our people what is very specific about us. And we found out that, oh my God, Elixir is quite specific because usually it's not the first choice language for anyone. There are no graduates who just learned Elixir and nothing else. This is the language for developers who are hungry, who want something more. And that you have to actually use a different way to reach such people, because they use different media, they are interested in different things than other developers. Another thing is that when I've actually asked my people in my team, but if there's one thing that you would like to know about this company before joining that would convince you to come here, what would be this thing. And they've, like 75% of them answered culture. How do I advertise my culture on no-fluff jobs? It's just not possible. So then we find out very quickly that, oh my God, we have Muda. Sourcers, HR, and headhunters are Muda. They are not able to sell what we are trying to sell. So we've decided that engineers are the best ambassadors, engineers are the best recruiters. And we've implemented just that. And in plenty of organizations you hear, this is a waste, this is not efficient, this is wasting such expensive resources, and so on. But the point is that this is an investment because recruitment is getting new engineers, right? So it all makes sense. And it makes wonders. Because as a new developer, as a person who will potentially join the company, you want to speak to other developers to actually ask them very specifically, how do you work? What do you do? How does your system feels like when working with it, and so on. So this was quite revealing. We've learned plenty of other things as well. We've done a very careful consideration of our successes and failures in recruitment. And we find out that the skill is not really very relevant. It's one of 6 categories we use right now to assess people, and not the most important ones. Because usually people are picking up the skills very, very fast, and there are some other things they cannot. There's a very interesting description of our experiment, Wanna Be Elixir Engineer. This is like our way of recruiting Elixir developers. It's present on the web, on my blog, so if you want to learn about the details, feel free, or just ask me during one of the breaks. Yeah, so another story. The Triumvirate takes over. It's inspired by ancient Rome. So I said that we are not copying anything, but apparently we did. How to make sure that things will happen in scale? This sounds like a very odd question, but who should be responsible for things happening when the organization gets bigger and bigger? It's a relevant question, I believe. The standard solutions are, don't think about it, just do Scrum, and things will be okay. Proxy more efficiently, so expose and distribute the information more efficiently, or create positions of control, which means more managers. We approach it in a different way. We will look for the real problems, why some companies are more effective than others, and what does cause this effectiveness, and do we really need project managers to have anything done? So we've tried to dig into our history and what has worked and what didn't, and we find out that we have 2 categories of people, drivers and passengers. Drivers add energy to the whole system, to the whole, let's say, work environment, and passengers just consume the energy. And the point is that no drive is Muda. At this point, we realized that the things, the projects, topics, without the drivers were not happening. And the other thing we've learned is that things which didn't have feedback, so there was no one who actually cared for your particular work, they were not moving. And I don't mean a personal feedback, but I mean the project feedback. So there had to be a feedback on the daily basis, even if developers didn't really like it, to actually make things happen. Also, we've learned that different people have different strengths. And if we are looking just for some people to take the whole ownership over the things happening, this will not work, because they will not feel confident about aspects of work which are not familiar to them. If I put an architect in charge, probably he will not be very confident about the product aspects. Or if I put an architect, he may not be the best organizer of work in terms of splitting, distributing, and so on, so on. So, and another thing which was pretty much crippling our efficiency was the vacuum or the void. So local responsibilities. Designer is responsible for design, developer for development, and usually the work was falling in between, between the designer and developer. So our focus, our main constraint to fix was fixing this vacuum. We found out that local ownership is Muda. Delayed integration, so someone waiting for someone else, and then the stuff waiting as inventory, it's Muda, and all kinds of miscommunication are Muda. So then we decided to form the Triumvirate. It means that each topic we had in the company had to have 3 owners, 3 people who were like caring for different aspects of this topic. 1 for product, 1 for architecture, and 1 for the delivery. And to have it succeed, we have to make sure that they are all accountable. It's their ass to actually make sure that this will happen. And they either all succeed or all fail. It's not possible for them to have different KPIs. They have same purpose. And if things do not happen, they are all to blame, or they are all to take responsibility for this. And what? Guess what? It worked. There was, during this more than 17 months of the story of this company, there was no one situation when actually we had to apply some sort of conflict resolution because they were struggling or whatever. No, whenever they were struggling, it was always the positive, the constructive struggle. It may look really tricky because many people confuse leadership with management, but we found out that all people have to be leaders. And being a leader doesn't mean being a manager. Being a leader means being a leader in your particular discipline. So you can be a leader as a software developer, as a designer, as an architect, as whatever. Because being a leader actually means inspiring others and being a role model. So being a leader is being this driver. Being a leader is being the person who may not be in charge because there is some kind of given authority. It's actually pushing things forward because you have this certainty, you have this clarity of what to do. So what we found out is that distributing in this particular scenario, distributing the authority into these three people gave them the confidence that as a team they can achieve more. Another thing which is actually quite tricky in so many organizations is keeping people engaged. How do you have these engagement indexes and so on. You have so many motivations talk, pep talks. And of course, standard solutions are usually about raising salaries or up or out career models. So like bumping the titles, which are quite virtual, senior, more senior, ninja, whatever. Or you are just fine that people are not motivated. You just let them go and you just hire new ones. So in our case, we make a research again, and we find out again based on the cases we had in our company that what really, really works is making people intrapreneurs. Intrapreneurs sounds very similar to entrepreneurs. So it's making people to work for your company as if they have worked for their own company. And this is super tricky. But this is the only actual way to really motivate people. And how to do this? The first thing we did is we've created some sort of social contract. Social contract is a virtual contract. You don't actually sign it, but it's an agreement between every person who works in the company that we share the same ambition. And I know it sounds like kumbaya, mambo jumbo, and so on. It's just a soft thing, but still, it's some sort of commitment. You explicitly say, I do accept this social contract. I am here to build this another Airbnb and so on. It makes a difference. It makes a surprising difference. And it defines what you expect from others and what is to be expected from you. And it's all about aligning your individual goals to the goals on the team. Another thing we are explicitly telling people and we execute is that we don't look for coders, we look for people who care about the domain. So if you are to work for this company, if you are to work on this product, you have to understand what you are building and why you are building. So these people who are not interested in that will not be motivated because if the product grows, it will not satisfy them. It will not, give them this positive attitude that, oh my God, we are getting this effect. So that's why I would tell you that in our context, coders were muda, even the best coders. If someone is the pure coder, it didn't work at all. So the ultimate goal or like the ultimate solution to our problem was the partnership. What does it mean? Everyone in the company could become a co-owner, and the same rules applied for everyone. When the company have seen that someone is really contributing to the product, that someone is really putting his emotions and a bit of himself into the product, this person was getting like a gift from the company, which is a number of restricted share units. And in this way, everyone, not literally everyone, because more than 50%, but I won't reveal the exact number, but plenty of people who had this, and they were working for their own future success. This was the major loyalty building factor. a real loyalty building factor, because right now what you are doing on the daily basis were your investment in your future. This made a hell of a difference. Right now, people had no problem with pragmatism and making decisions which really contributed to, I would say, reasonable future. And this concept of skin in the game is borrowed from famous book by Nicholas Nassim Taleb. Another thing which is usually a problem in organizations, and we've approached it in this iterative style based on experiments, building system, and so on, was the development agility. What is it about? Ever-increasing inertia and friction. So the fact that building a simple feature takes more and more time, the bigger the system grows. And plenty of organizations are quite, I would say, lost when it comes to finding out why this happens and what to do. So we just sliced the elephant. We've came down to the particular problems, why the entry threshold raises for new people, why the unit cost of development raises, and so on. And we've decided to apply some sort of disciplined approach here. So the development agility is amount of pure coding in coding. What does it really mean? It means that all the code which is not functional is a waste. So yes, these beautiful layers of abstractions to make clean code, they're muda. All the boilerplate, it's muda because it's a cost. You have to maintain it. All the repetitions, even if they have justification in the architecture concepts or whatever, they're muda. And all the waiting time, like waiting until the stuff compiles, until it's deployed, and so on, this is also muda. So we've said it explicitly. Right now, let's address these wastes. But these are not the only kinds of waste. There's the entropy I've mentioned before, and there are several sources of entropy. Technical debt, model debt, so the weight of the past design decisions. The tribal knowledge, so the stuff that you always have to re-engineer every 2 weeks to fix the issue because you don't have it documented. It's also muda. All the accidental complexity is muda, but how to fight it? So the first thing is that we found out that what is really ineffective is making technical decisions. So we introduced a framework for making the decisions in a very fast way. It has like 8 points or something, but I will not bore you with all of them. The major conclusions were that direct democracy is muda. So how do you actually make the decisions? Each meeting had some sort of resolution or decision-making constitution. Who makes the decision in the end if we don't make it in 15 minutes, for instance? It's just a simplification. Decisions have to be fast. They don't have to be perfect unless they are permanent. If they are permanent, we go as special mode. And when we make a decision, even if someone in the room is unhappy, but we've made the decision using this decision-making framework, 100% of people had to adhere. So cannot be any passive-aggressive, no mumbling in the corridors and so on. You have to adhere. This is the part of our social contract. And this has sped up things amazingly. Another thing which is a problem in many organizations is lava flow effect. What is lava flow effect? Lava is pretty much like on the screen. It's zigzagging down and you pretty much cannot stop it. And you have a lava flow effect in your software projects when you have the history of your past design decisions, of your past architectures, when you are trying to build a new architecture, but you forget about old stuff. Old stuff remains the old way. So pretty much after a few years, you have all these zigzags, old architectures, old legacies over legacies and legacies, and this brand new shiny stuff at the end of this. And this is a major cost. Maintaining these old parts, old architectures is a huge cost. So we've decided that we want to avoid this explicitly. So each time we are making an architecture decision that creates something new, that changes the old, there have to be a transition plan. And there's always a person responsible for the change, and this person is responsible for the transition plan as well. And if there are any cleanups that have to be done, there are also the parts of definition of done. Without them, no transition will happen. And what is more, each transition have to be measurable. So it means that we are cleaning just in time, and it's like built into the DNA of this company. It's about discipline. It's not about any particular tool. If we do this, things will be beautiful and shiny and fast. If we forget about this, we'll have a temporal boost, but then things will go not really nice. Another thing which is not really obvious is that after 4 years, we had a huge code base, really, really huge. And forget about your beautiful dreamlike architectures. This is not possible. We didn't want to go any, let's say, standard approach. We wanted to carve our own way. Put the microservices apart and so on. What we found out is that we just have to approach our system multi-level of detail. So it's like Google Maps. You are scrolling down into the detail, or you are going up to the higher level of concept. And on each level of concept, within some boundaries, you have to stick to some conventions, but only within boundaries. So we completely ditched the concept of having global conventions, for instance. It's not feasible. It's not possible. Conventions are good if you are very consistent about them within some boundaries. And this has made a huge difference, because right now it was not like the whole company has to agree on particular things. It makes things much, much easier. If you want to learn more about this, look into the theory of promise, for instance, in Burgess, or the philosophy of software design. Another very interesting thing, which I think is quite obvious for many people already, is that architecture doesn't happen by chance. So you cannot make a big architectural change as a side effect of other project. You have to be very, very honest. Right now, we have to change this. And this has this justification. So let's make it a project. Let's allocate people. Let's first get out of firefighting mode. Let's do it proactive, so we are not forced to do it in the firefighting mode. Let's allocate time and people, and let's do it the proper way. Because the other way, the changes won't happen. And the final problem in this part we wanted to somehow deal with is the small things, the small annoying things we would solve on the daily basis because they pop up during normal day of work, but we never have time because there's always feature to be delivered, there's always deadline and so on. So what we did to actually get this done is we because the indifference breaks culture. So if we just agree that, okay, this happens, we don't have this time and so on, then we agree to crap. So, and all these delays in dealing with the scrap is muda. So what we decided is to sacrifice one team in the rotational duty of fixing this stuff on the go, the Kanban way. And this is the sacrifice because there is a cost of that, but this helps on fixing the small things that contribute to the technical debt as they appear. And this also makes a huge difference. Yeah, the final chapter or the final story when it comes to actually what we did is about bosses. So actually, do you need bosses? How do you balance control and autonomy? In which way? Typically, you do it using feudal hierarchy, the supervision, or you set plenty of policies so people know what to do and how to do. But it really doesn't work. But still, there are some problems that are to be solved. Who assesses the performance? Because people want to know whether they are doing good or not. And everyone wants to grow, so everyone would like to be senior in some way. But what does it mean to be senior, actually? And how to use this seniority? So we've learned plenty of ways here. So the first one was that organization grows in a very different pace than people. Sometimes the organization grows much faster. And then what else? Who will deal with the organization in general? Sometimes people stop to grow, and what to do about this? Just get talent out the outside? Other thing, which was completely mind-blowing for us, was that at the different stage of the organization needs different people, different software developers. Really, within 1 year of time, we came from such a stage that people who are doing great stuff were not really relevant anymore. It's covered in the Blitzscaling, the book I've already mentioned. Reid Hoffman splits developers into 3 categories: Marines, soldiers, and police officers. So Marines are hackers. They are great for the garage times of the startup. They are just hacking things to work very, very fast. They don't care about consequences. And they are great in the startup times. Soldiers are great in the scale-up times, when you actually have to scale quickly, set some foundation, and this has to be maintainable. You have to have more people jumping in, but still you are in the huge growth period. And police officers is more about the stable, slow growth of an already matured organization which have a stable foundation. So it's brutal. because sometimes it means that people lose their place because they cannot accommodate to the new way of doing things. And this can happen pretty much in a few months. But this is how it works, really. Another thing is that if your organization is big, if you already have more than 100 people, then you have to distribute the decision making and without micromanagement. And this is really hard. And many organizations approach it in this way that they just create tons of policies that you can do this, in this case you can do this, and this doesn't work. The way to actually deal with that is to create values of the organization and principles like 10 commandments. And every organization that can be somehow derived of at least one principle is fine. You're allowed to do this, every decision. You're allowed to do this. You don't have to ask anyone for approval or whatever. Because this, asking for approval is muda, because then you are waiting, then you have a bottleneck. This also made a huge difference, and this has appeared in their real life. There's a lot about that in a book about Netflix culture titled Powerful by Patty McCord. Another consideration was about seniority, and this was also quite hard. What does it really mean, seniority? And we found out that seniority is leverage, so the impact you made on other people. And it made things very, very simple, because right now you don't really have to have senior managers or whoever to assess the seniority. You just see how the work happens. Your teammates can assess your leverage on them. And everyone has leverage. Senior developer has leverage, architects leverage, analyst has leverage, and so on. So right now, things like assessing the seniority got much, much easier. And then it was very easy to find out who is, for instance, proxying, so who is not making the leverage, who is just passing information further, or who is just a consultant who is avoiding responsibility, which is also not making the leverage, because such people are muda. Of course, the seniority has to also be always associated to being effective, so getting the results. So people who are not getting the results and their leverage is just speaking to many people, they are not leaders of any sort. And then we found out with our final conclusion here that our role is not defined by our boss and the people we supervised, but our accountability, so our purpose, our goal. And everyone is supposed to build our role. So everyone in a role, for example, in the role of manager in this company, was supposed to create a contract with people, actual contract, actual document, with people who she or he collaborates with. And in this contract, it was explicitly written, this is what I will provide you, but this is what I expect from you. And they were actually signing this contract. There was a meeting, they were meeting all together around the table, and they were agreeing what this particular role about. So these people have to actually define the role, they have actually to sell this role, they have to evolve this role, and decide how to act within this role. And it has happened several times in the history of the organization that the role got unuseful anymore. They were not used, they were deprecated because they had no justification. So people had to find another role, or some people left the company. But still, there was no one single point of one single bottleneck who decided what kind of roles should be. The life and the needs showed what kind of roles we need. And it changed pretty much on the daily basis. So these were like quite the big things, and to come up with these conclusions, it took us a lot of time. But there are small things we did on the daily basis as well. I can give you some small tips. The first one is about rituals. There's a perfect ritual. It's such simple, but for me it was extra revealing. It's titled Feast of Five, and it's all about feedback. So probably you've encountered in your real life situations when all the people are leaving the meeting and everyone is already so jaded and so tired, we've just wasted another hour, but no one is saying that aloud. And what happens? Next week you meet at the same meeting, right? And no one says anything. And what is Feast of Five about? After the meeting is done, every participant, using one hand, shows how satisfied he or she is with the meeting. 1, 2, 3. With 5 being super satisfied, 0 means, oh my God, what kind of crap was that? So if you do just that, and if every participant of the meeting does just that, you have the immediate feedback. And it's super striking. If you just see everyone around showing like that, it has to spur some kind of discussion, because otherwise you are in a very dysfunctional organization, right? So we are able to, it's immediate feedback. It's about fixing things very, very quickly. This is stolen from a recent book by Jürgen Appello. Another thing is about metrics. So there are several kind of metrics. Usually your organization have a Northern Star metric, which shows whether you are going in the right direction. But what is really useful on the level of each team, on the level of each particular person, is differentiating between goal metrics and action metrics. So your goal is, for instance, to reduce the number of bugs. And your action is what you're doing to reduce the number of bugs. So for instance, create more E2E automated tests. And then if you measure this separately, you see that, okay, I have more and more E2E automated tests, but still I have the same number of bugs. So it means that the solution you are trying to apply doesn't work. It doesn't fulfill this goal. So keeping the separation, or classifying these metrics, it really helps a lot. It's a nice trick. Another way which really helps a lot is about experiments, because developers love experiments. But if you add some structure to experiments, it helps a lot. For instance, if you constrain the number of experiments to 2 per some increment, if each experiment has to have a goal, a clear purpose, it has to be time-bound and it has to be summarized. So after the experiment, people who are conducting this experiment are supposed to present their research. And then it makes a hell of a difference. Because right now, the experiments are useful because they are targeted at something. Postmortems. I'm sure you know the idea. This really helps to build a huge awareness. In the organization I'm speaking about, they were built after all kinds of failures, just as a learning experience, shared with everyone, whole organization, and the biggest of them were presented every 2 weeks in front of the whole team. Speaking about cognitive bias, so the typical conceptual errors people are prone to do. I know it sounds more like behavioral psychology, because it really does. But if you are not making people aware of what cognitive bias are, then they will fall into these traps. So what we had is every 2 weeks we have lightning talks where we cover particular cognitive bias, like hindsight bias, like confirmation bias, halo effect, and so on. Being a devil's advocate, so questioning your own ideas, it also makes huge of a difference, because this makes you, forces you to stand opposed to your ideas, to criticize them, which means that you are giving a deeper consideration than just popping up with something out of the blue. And what really helps, this is the final one, is an information radiation, which means sharing all the information in public for all the subscribers. Because right now people are able to improve their stuff, to apply their own Kaizen on their own part, because they have a wider access to information, which may give them a different context. This also makes a huge difference. To conclude, this whole journey of the 17 months in this particular company, it's all about mindset. So actually the particular tools, how we applied them, it was not that important. The fact that people picked up this mindset, this was what was really important. The continuous improvement has to be a part of the culture. So all the people have to embrace it. It cannot be, you cannot have a chief improvement officer or the improvement team or the improvement person or the improvement sprint. It doesn't work like this. You either do it on a daily basis, otherwise it will not happen. Improvement is not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's a journey. It happens over the time, and initially you may be discouraged how slowly it starts, but it accumulates over time. And then after 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, you see the amazing effects. And these problems, I know that you may be surprised. What the hell are you talking about? Like recruitment or seniority or bosses? I don't care. It's not my problem. It's not software development. But in fact, it is. These are engineers' problems. This was engineering journey. These were engineers. Like I told you, this was mainly engineering organization. And we are able to make the best decisions and to really improve stuff and really achieve great things just because these were engineers making decisions about engineering stuff based on the engineering approach. This is what made the difference. You have to be where the work really is. I had to recruit to find out recruitment problems because otherwise it's just not possible. Everything has to be owned. Everything has to be has to have a person who is pushing it, who is owning it, or just escalating an issue. Otherwise, things will get stuck. They will somehow be hung in vacuum, and they will just not happen. And think for yourself. Don't copy stuff. Don't take things that have worked somewhere else. Just the context is the king. Think about your own organization. Don't revolutionize. just evolve, because there's already plenty of things that you are too used to that are good in your organization. Things you've made, you've performed, you've created or improved for several years in many cases. And I know it sounds ridiculous and some people are not comfortable about this, but everyone has to lead. You have to lead something, even if it's a small part. We need this energy, this catalysts who are pushing things forward. Otherwise, if everyone is passive, things just are not moving forward. I've seen organizations of 300 people literally wasting €1 million per week, which were not delivering anything, just because everyone was passive and looking around else for other people to take actions. Yeah, and some inspirations again. All right, thank you. In the bottom, you have the link to this actual presentation. It's available online in the public, so you can see this book covers if you are interested. There's actually also a bunch of slides in the stack on the right, which I haven't used. There are some other inspirations there as well. If you have, because we are out of time, so if you have any questions regarding what we did, how we did, and what has worked and what hasn't, feel free to catch me during any of the breaks, and I will be very happy to answer your questions. Thank you very much, and have a great conference, guys.